Hi there, so today we're looking at Unit 5.4, Introducing Inequalities. Our objectives today: to use the correct notation to show inequalities, to write down whole numbers or integers that satisfy an inequality, and to represent inequalities on a number line. For this lesson then, you are going to need to have your maths book or some paper, a ruler, a pencil and a pen. Okay, so let's just start off by checking our prior knowledge then. So we need to be able to read positive and negative numbers. We should know that -6 is less than -2 and that -7 is greater than -10. So particularly with our negative numbers, making sure we know which are smaller and which are larger. We should also be able to draw a number line from negative to positive numbers. Okay, so today then we're looking at inequalities. So we have 4 symbols that represent our inequalities. Now these are probably familiar to you, even if you've not called them inequalities before. We've got our less than symbol, our less than or equal to. So less than or equal to is the same less than symbol, but we've got this line underneath to show equal to as well. We've got our greater than symbol, so it starts with the widest part going to the smaller one, and we've got our greater than or equal to. Now the way we read those then, for example, if I have x is greater than 3, that means x is greater than 3. So open mouth at the beginning going towards the smaller point is our greater than, and it means that x could be any value that is bigger than 3. So it could be 3.5 or 4 or 100 or any number that is greater than 3. Our next one then, we've got it pointing the other way, so we've got the smaller point going towards the larger value. So x is less than -6, means that x could be any value that is less than that -6. So it could be -7, or it could be -10.23, or it could be -50. So we need to make sure we know which direction we are moving. Our next one then, x is greater than or equal to -2. This means x could be -2. So when it says greater than or equal to, it is allowed to be this value because it could be equal to that value, or it could be another value that is bigger than -2, such as 1.34 or 5. Again, any value that is bigger than -2. And this one then, x is less than or equal to 10. Again, x could be the value 10. So when we've got the equal sign, it can be that value, or it could be any number that is less than 10, so smaller than 10, such as 9 or 2.1. Okay. Sometimes then we have 2 inequalities that can be combined for a single statement. So if x is greater than 3, and x is also less than or equal to 14, so it satisfies both those inequalities at the same time, we might write it like this. We could say that 3 is less than x, and x is less than or equal to 14. So that's essentially telling us that x is a number between 3 and 14 where we don't include 3, but we could include the number 14. So sometimes we have these double ones where a value suits 2 inequalities at the same time. So we're going to look at all these different types today. All right, to start off with then, have a look at those. You need to put the correct symbol between the values, so either less than, greater than, or equals between each of these numbers. Pause the video, have a go at that now in your book. Okay, so let's have a look then. So 4 is less than 6, so we've got our less than symbol. For B, 5 is greater than 2. C, 15 is greater than 8. In D, 6 is greater than 0.7. For E, 4.8 is greater than 4.79. So remember, when we're looking at a value, it's not how many digits it's got that makes it bigger. It's if we start at the beginning. So we've got a 4, they're the same, an 8 and a 7 or 8 is bigger than 7, so this value must be greater. And finally, 4.5 is equal to 4.5, equal meaning they are exactly the same, they're worth the same amount. Okay, so just make sure you're happy with how we use those symbols. All right then, so far we've looked at values, and we can assume that x could be any real number. I gave you some examples at the beginning of different numbers it could be. Now, sometimes we're told that x can only be an integer. So an integer, remember, is a positive or a negative whole number. We're asked then to find a list of integer values, so whole numbers that satisfy the inequality. Now that word satisfy simply means they fit with this inequality. So we've got -3 is less than x, which is less than or equal to 5. So we need to find any whole numbers that this value of x could be. So essentially we're being asked to find all the whole numbers that go between -3 and 5, remembering that we're not allowed to include -3 because there's no equal sign here, but we are allowed to include 5. So if we start off then, we've got -3 here, so it's got to be bigger. X is at the bigger open mouth side, so bigger than -3, so the next number that's bigger than -3 is -2, then -1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and because it says it can be equal to 5, we're allowed the number 5. So whenever we're doing these, always start with the smallest number, decide if you're allowed to have this number or you need the next one up, then all the values in between there to the last number, again deciding are we allowed to have the last number or do we need to stop one before the last number. All right, make sure you're happy with that. I'm going to give you some to practice. There you are then, pause the video, have a go and see if you can find the integer values that satisfy these inequalities. Okay, so in our first one then, we've got to get from -2 up to 3. Now there's no equal sign here, so we're not allowed to start at -2, so we have to start one number above -2, which is -1. And we go all the way up and we're allowed to include the number 3. So we go -1, 0, 1, 2 and 3. In our next one then, from -3 to 5, now we are allowed to include the -3 because it has the equals bit of the sign, but we're not allowed to include 5. We need to stop one before it because it doesn't have the equals bit. So we've got -3, -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, 3, and we stop at 4. The last one then, we're going from -1 to 4. Now again, no equal sign, so we can't use the number -1. We have to start one number above. And we can't have the number 4, so we stop one number below. So starting then, one number above -1 is 0, 1, 2, 3, and we stop before we get to the number 4. Make sure you're happy with those and you can see why we have stopped at the numbers we have. So our key point there from this part then is that an integer is a positive or negative whole number or 0. The integer that satisfies this inequality, so from 2 less than x, which is less than 3, would be -1, 0, 1 and 2. Okay. So now that we've had a look at values inequalities can be when we're having integer values, we might also want to show that there could be an infinite amount of possibilities. So suppose x is greater than 2. Now that, remember, means that x can be any number bigger than 2. So it could just mean that it's 3 or 4 or 5. It could be 1,000, it could be 1,000,000, it could be 1,000,000,000, and it can be any decimal number in between all of those as well. So there are far too many, we wouldn't be able to write them down. So we need another way to show these. So the way we show them then is that we show them on a number line. So here we've got another number line. Now to show this on the number line, we're asked to show that x is greater than 2. So we're going to put a circle above the number 2. We want to show all of the values that are greater than 2. So greater than 2 are numbers that are bigger than 2. So that's in this direction here. So we draw an arrow from our circle to the end of our number line with our arrowhead on the end to show that we're pointing in this direction, all the numbers greater than 2. Now, if we're not sure which way we should be pointing, if we look at our inequality, it's again a bit like the arrowhead, it's pointing to the right, so our arrow goes to the right. The reason that this one's a hollow circle is that it means that the 2 is not included. So whenever we see a hollow circle, it means the number isn't included. So we're not including 2, but we are including everything just after. So that might be here, that might be 2.1 or 2.2 or 2.3, but we're not including the number 2, but every single value to infinity that is greater than the number 2. Okay, let's look at another one. This time then, what about if we want to show x is less than or equal to 3? So here's our number line. So we're going to draw a circle at 3. Now you'll notice this time that I've filled in the circle, and that's because it's equal to. So a hollow circle means it's not included, so no equal part of the sign. But if it's got the equals part of the sign, we're going to fill in the circle to say we are allowed the number 3. Now we want x to be less than or equal to 3, so we need to point towards all the numbers that are less than 3, so that's in this direction. And again, you can see our little inequality is pointing to the left, so we're going to draw our arrow to the left, again all the way to the end of the number line with an arrowhead to show that it is pointing to infinity. So a solid circle means the number is included, so anywhere there's an equal sign with it, we have a solid circle, and again the arrow extends all the way to the end to show that all the solutions go in that direction. All right, our practice for you now then. So you need to draw 6 number lines from -5 to +5, and above each number line draw the inequality, making sure as to whether your circle should be hollow or filled in, and that your arrow is pointing in the same direction as your inequality. Pause the video, have a go now. Okay, so let's have a look at the solutions for these then. So these are our first 3. So we had for A, x is greater than 1. So we've drawn a hollow circle at 1 because there's no equals, and we're pointing towards all of the values that are greater than 1, so in the same direction as the inequality. For B, we wanted x is less than 4, so again a hollow circle at 4 this time, and we're pointing at all the numbers that are less than 4. For C, we've got x is less than -5. So our hollow circle at -5 and little short arrow this time, again pointing to the left. Our next 3. For D, we've got x is greater than or equal to 3.5. So we've got a solid circle above 3.5, and we're pointing towards the right, so all the numbers greater than 3.5. E, x is less than or equal to 3. So again, a solid circle at 3, this time pointing to the left for all the numbers less than 3. And finally, x is greater than or equal to -2. So again, a solid circle at -2, but we want all the values greater than, so we're pointing to the right. Make sure you're happy with your answers there before you move on. Okay, so our key point there then, make a note of these key points, remember, in your book, they are important. So an empty circle shows the values not included, a filled in circle shows the value is included, and the arrow shows the direction of the values towards infinity, so showing us that it could be any value in that direction. Okay, the next type we're going to have a look at drawing on our number line then. are the ones where we have that dual inequality, so two inequalities there. So we've got -1 is less than or equal to x, which is less than 4. So that means, remember, our values of x are between -1 and 4. So again, if we just did the integers, we could write down the integers, but we could have any value in between. So it could be decimals as well. So we need to be able to show that there are a whole range of values between those two numbers this time. So let's have a look at how we show that on our number line. So we've got our number line. So our first number then is -1, and we can see that -1 has the less than and equal to, and we now know that if it's got an equal to, it's going to be a solid circle. Our next number is 4, and that doesn't have the equal to sign, so above the 4 we're going to have a hollow circle. So we've got our solid circle above -1, our hollow circle above the number 4, and this time our line goes between the two. Remember, this x is in between our two values, so it's telling us that x has to be a number in between. Okay, so we're not pointing in one direction or another. X is in between our two values this time. Let's have a look at one more just to check. So if we want 0 is less than or equal to x, which is less than or equal to 1, on our number line, we need a solid circle above 0 because it's got an equal to sign. We also need a solid circle above 1 because that's got an equal to line, and our x is in between, so our line joins our two circles together. So that represents the values of x between 0 and 1. Make sure you're happy with those before you have a go yourselves. Okay, so again your turn. So you need to draw 6 new number lines from -5 to 5 and have a go at drawing those inequalities. Again, making sure you're happy with whether you should have a solid circle or a hollow circle, and this time remembering that the line is between the two to represent the values between the two numbers. Pause the video, have a go now. Okay, so the solutions for these ones then. So our first one for A then, from -3 to 4, we've got a solid circle at -3, a hollow circle at 4, and our line in between. For B, from -2 and 5, there's no equal signs at all, so they should both be hollow circles, our line between. For C, 0 to 4/5. Okay, so this time again, are hollow circles for both. So 0 and 4/5 is just a little bit less than 1, and our line between. D then, -2 is going to have a full circle and 1 a hollow circle. There we go, our line in between. For E, -4 is going to have a full circle, 1 a hollow circle, this one here. And for F, they're both got equal signs, so 2 filled in circles, 1 at 0 and 1 at 3 with our line in between. So check your answers, make sure you're happy with whether your circles are full or hollow and that they're above the appropriate numbers with that line in between. Okay, so as well as us being able to draw our inequalities on the number line, we might be given them on the number line and asked to write down the inequality. Now the first thing we need to check is which letter we're going to use. So the letter is often put here at the end of the line. So in this case we're using the letter X. So sometimes people wonder what letter they're using. It should be at the end of the line to tell you which letter it is. So we're going to start with X. Now our first one then, we've got a solid circle above the number 2, and our arrow is pointing at numbers that are greater than 2. So we must be using our greater than or equal to. So again, look to see which way the arrow is pointing. Your inequality should be facing in the same direction. So we've got our X, that's our letter we started with, and we've got greater than, pointing to the right, or equal to because it's filled in, and our number was the number 2. Looking at this one then, again we've got a solid circle. We're going to start with the letter X again. So our solid circle is above 0, but this time it's pointing to the left. So that's pointing at all the numbers that are less than 0. Basically, because it's solid, it must be less than or equal to. So x is less than or equal to 0. So remember, if it's a single inequality, we always start with the letter first, then our inequality, then our number. So another single inequality here then. So again, the letter happens to be x. So x, our inequality, we're pointing towards the left. So that's less than. It's not filled in, so it doesn't need the equal bit. And we're going to use our number 2. So x is less than 2. So if we always start with the letter, then we draw the inequality, then decide whether it needs an equals part or not, and then the number, we should get these right. So again, we're going to start with the letter x. We're pointing to the right, so that's greater than. It's not filled in, so we don't need the equal symbol, and it's above the value -1. So x is greater than -1. Now for our dual inequality then. So we've got our two numbers. So with these ones, we start with the lowest number. So our lowest number here is 1. We can see that it's a hollow circle. Now for these dual ones, we always use the less than or less than and equal to. Okay, so we don't need any of the greater than symbols. It's always either less than or equal to. So a hollow circle is less than. Our letter x is going to go in the middle this time because we've got the line in the middle. And then we're going to have a less than and equal to symbol because it's filled in, and our number 5. So remember, our number 1 to start with, it's hollow, so we're going to put less than. Then our letter x, solid circle, less than or equal to, and then our value 5. It's really important that we just use symbols that point in the same direction. I can't mix my less than and greater than symbols together. I can't have one of each. So we're just going to use less than and less than or equal to for these type where they're joined in the center. So for this one then, we've got our -4. It's filled in, so that's less than or equal to our letter x, which is less than our number 2. Okay, so make sure again you're happy with each part of that. So if the line's in the middle, the x is in the middle, and it's always either less than or equal to or less than with a number at each side. Pause the video, check through that, and make sure you're happy with that before you move on to have a go yourselves. Okay, so your turn then. So pause the video, write down the inequalities represented by the number line. Make sure you check the letter that you're using and whether you're using a hollow circle, so less than or greater than, a filled in circle, less than or equal to or greater than or equal to. And remember, if we've got a double one, then it's always less than and less than or equal to. We're not going to use the greater than symbols for those. Pause the video, have a go now. Okay, so our first one then is a single inequality. So we can see that because we have an arrow rather than a line in the middle. So our letter is x. We've got it pointing to the left, so that's less than. It's filled in, so less than or equal to, and our number is 6. For B, another single one. So we're going to start with our letter x. Our arrow is pointing to the right, so that's greater than. It's not filled in, so just greater than, and our number is 1. For C, we've got our two values. So remember, we start with the lowest, so -3, then less than our letter x, which is less than or equal to 1. For D, -4, less than or equal to x, which is less than 1. For E, both filled in this time, so we're going to use the less than and equal to symbol. So 7, less than or equal to x, which is less than or equal to 8. And finally, the last one, 2 hollow circles. So we're going to use 2 less than symbols. So -3 is less than x, which is less than 4. Make sure you've marked your work there. Check you're happy with that. Okay, well done working through that today then. If that's the first time you've used inequalities, you might want to go back and watch that through again, or go on to Active Learn and have a go at some of the practice questions, or watch some of the videos on there as well to help you. Next lesson, we're going to have a look at using inequalities to find the value of x, so solving inequalities much in the same way that we solve linear equations.